Okay, good evening, everybody. This is an international speech, so I will talk in English. First of all, I would like to thank Oral Avci to be present to make this the presentation. For your information, I met Oral Avci the first time in Bucharest last year. He was making this presentation during a meeting organized by the European Philately Academy, and I was impressed about how was interested at this presentation. So further, I asked to transform this presentation in an article that was published on the Postal Org. And now, finally, Oral can make this presentation for all the friends of CIFO and the CIFT and the other association, Italian association. Just some information about Oral Avci. He's born in 1960 in Kirkuk, Iraq. He's a graduate to the university and also earned electrical engineer a diploma. He has extensive experience in industrial and advanced technology system through roles in the international engineering company before co-founding POMAC in 1992. POMAC operated in Turkey and globally, focusing on engineering contracting activities. He split his life between Istanbul and Munich, Germany. In terms of the philately, he's a distinguished member of Royal Philately Society in London, and is also a member of the European Academy of the Philately. So he also actively contributed to cultural and professional associations, including the Science of Art Foundation in Iraq, Turks Culture, and Solidarity Association. As far as concerning the postal history, he recently write a book that was also published at the review on Postal regarding the Ottoman Iraq during the British occupation between 1914 up 1923. He's also get a lot of recognition at Helvetia 2022, a gold medal in Ankara in 2023, a large never mail in Thailand, and other honor highlighted in the book. Now he presents officially his book in Birmingham, and thanking to Oral Avci to make this presentation. I give you the stage now. Please start.
Yes, Claudio, thank you very much, and good evening to everybody from the Philately Society. I'm really pleased to be on this platform. Well, the story of the book started about 5 years ago when the pandemic, COVID started, and we needed to stay at home for very long days and time. So I had a couple of articles about the collection I have, which I collected for maybe 45 years. And as Mr. or Claudio mentioned, I born in Iraq and grew up in Baghdad until my 17, when I came to Turkey to study at the university in Turkey. And so I had a mixed collection of Ottoman and Iraq stamps, and of course covers. And I had a real interest in the history of the Middle East, Levant, of course, Iraq. So suddenly I noticed a very interesting thing about maybe 10 years ago, that at that time, of course, couple of Ottoman Turkish old stamps carried on British or Iraq name, and I couldn't understand how this had happened. So I went a bit deep to this story, which became in the end a book, actually. I spent about 2.5 years for the book. The subject was, as Mr. Claudio told you, I have made a couple of such presentations, and I'm really honored to make one more with all of you friends and try to explain how this happened. Well, the name of the presentation is a bit different. It is Iraq, a state crafted on stamps. Means that we'll see something very genius in the philately. I don't know if there's any other such thing that a state, actually a new state, born or established through stamps or using stamps. So, but we need to go a bit in the history of Iraq or the Ottoman Iraq. So I have some slides about this history, about 15. So I need your patience before we start with the philatelic part of this story. So our story starts in Middle East or the Levant part of Iraq or Mesopotamia. So let's start with the geography of the place. As you see, we are in the Middle East. This is the cartography. And now we can see how this boundaries was established. This is the main boundary of the Middle East. You can see to the right or to the east, the Iran, Iraq, or Middle East, and to the west is where Egypt and Sudan is sitting. Of course, the Saudi Arabia, the Arabic Peninsula, and of course in the north, the old Ottoman states, or the today the Asia Minor or Turkey. So this is actually where we are talking about. Next is Next we will see that how was first the British involved in the Persian Gulf. Well, and it is very interesting. It goes back to 1619 when first time the British had made an agreement or a treaty with Persia to let the British ships at that time to use the Persian Gulf. Of course, exempted from duties because Persians were asking a lot of almost everybody, all ships, trading ships, to pay taxes for them. Of course, the British with this agreement, which you can see to the right of the slide, it's very interesting. I found this in one of the archives. They have exempted the British, but of course, with the cover of the British to save them or protect them from the Portuguese and the Spanish warships who were sailing in the Gulf. Of course, most of you knows that the British had long history in the East through the East India Company. This is the most important British subsidiary was in the East working, which is even been settled in Bushehr. We will come there in 1763. Okay, so next we will see something very interesting. We have to know this. While the British commenced the first telegraph station on the Persian Gulf shore in 1960, and this is the telegraph station of Fao. This is in 1965. Well, this is very interesting. This is the first Indo-European telegraph line, which went from, you can see in the middle, Fao. This is the last city of Iraq. It is on the Persian Gulf in the end of Shatt al-Arab. And from there, there is a cable underwater, which is connected to Bushehr, which from there continues in the land to India. So we can see logistically and postal way or communication part in the British, taking, of course, the acceptance of the Ottoman at that time, they made their first station in Iraq or Ottoman Iraq at that time in Fao. This is the first Middle East telegraph station have commissioned. This was linking India to Bushehr, you can see it in the corner, right corner. And then from there with the cable underwater to Fao. And from there, it was going through the whole land to Europe. Okay, so next, what was one more British involvement was after, of course, not only the communication lines, it was, everybody knows, of today's oil or the petrol. So it's as early as 1901, an agreement made with Muzaffar ad-Din Shah, who was the Shah or the Sultan of Iran or Persia. So they have granted the British at that time to explore oil in Masjid Suleiman. Of course, this is one of the first biggest oil exploration project in the Middle East. When they found the oil, immediately the British had started the oldest refinery in the Middle East, or in the world, maybe the second one after United States. It was the Abadan refinery. It's important to note that Abadan is just nearby to Fao. It is in the end of the or in the north of the Persian Gulf, very nearby. It is on the seaside, which was used by the British ships to be loaded the fuel. These ships used to go to India and even to continue to Australia. So that's why Abadan was the next critical part for the British in the Persian Gulf. Next, we see that this oil business was evolved a bit more, and the name is Turkish, but it's a British company. The Turkish Petroleum Company was established in 1912 to explore other areas in Iraq or in Mesopotamia, actually in the north, in the Mosul area, Kirkuk area. The Kirkuk, the city which I born actually. And in 1914, 50% of these shares was transferred to the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which then today everybody knows. This company is called the British Petroleum. So what is more is to understand about the British involvement in the Persian Gulf is that the British forces, just after 1 year of the war, First World War, they occupied Bushehr. Bushehr, maybe you have already saw in the map, this was the most critical peninsula in the Persian land, which just controls the Gulf. And we can see it's also first, this is a very philatelic, there is a special collection about Bushehr, by the way. It is very famous in the world. Many collectors are really working on this Bushehr under British occupation. I just added the stamp just to know that there was an occupation. I don't have the collection. I have only a couple of such stamps. We continue in the history a bit more. So let's look to the British India Army. I'm saying British India because the First World War was carried by British in two important fronts. The Western Front, Germany and France maybe, and the Eastern Front. In the Eastern Front, which is mainly was at that time Egypt and Mesopotamia, the Eastern Front army was carried on, or the expedition was carried out by the British India Army, of course, with British officers and Indian soldiers. So let's see what happened there. This is where our actually story starts. So when the war started in November 1914, first thing that the British have done to preserve, to control their interest in the Gulf, they have first thing done, they occupied this famous city, Fao, which is the end of the Shatt al-Arab, or it is just in the start of the Shatt al-Arab. Shatt al-Arab is a river, a big river, which is combined of Euphrates and Tigris. They have just moved there on the 6th of November, early as beginning of the war, and occupied this area. Fao Basra is the city on the Gulf, which is also very nearby. It's about 20 kilometers from Abadan. Abadan for the British was still a place which they cannot lose. Okay, we continue to one more important case in the First World War. I'm explaining this because these wars and these events will be reflected on our stamps. How could that happen? We will see. This is the biggest war between the Ottoman army and the British. It's called the Battle of Ctesiphon in November 1915, and where the British army were heading toward Baghdad to control the city or to occupy Baghdad. But unfortunately, or fortunately for the Ottomans, they have lost the war in Ctesiphon, and they retrieved to a very small city called Kut al-Imara, which later to become one of the most important historical area in Iraq, or for the British as well for the Ottomans. What happened in Kut al-Imara, it is important to remember this later on as well. Kut al-Imara will be reflected on our stamps. How? We will see. After many months of siege, the British have to surrender to the Ottomans on 29th of April, the year after. So this was the only defeat of the British army in Iraq or Mesopotamia through the whole war. Afterward, they have decided to move new soldiers or new army staff from India up to receive in Iraq 250,000 soldiers. So they worked this for one more year, and later on, they occupied Baghdad. Before that, again, a new, very interesting thing, which also will be reflected on our stamps, a very important agreement had been made between the British and the French to participate the Ottoman Middle East, let's say. So as you can see, the area A, this is a Sykes-Picot agreement. It's very important, one of the first agreements regarding pre-war or pre-peace agreements on 16th of May, 1916. This was agreement to partition Middle East or the Ottoman lands between the French and the British. Please have a notice that the area A is north of Iraq, an important part of Syria and Lebanon. B is Iraq, today's Jordan, and part of Egypt. The yellow part on the left, on the east, it's Palestine. So, and let's continue very quickly. This is another case which we will see on our stamps, again, reflecting of occupation of Baghdad by the Indian Expeditionary Forces, IEF. Please keep this word in your mind. It is IEF, which we will see them on stamps. So Stanley Maud was the general who had to capture Baghdad after 1 year from Kut al-Imara. What happened is, after occupation of Iraq, the British have decided to have a high commissioner, which is the governor, actually, the military government, is Percy Cox. This is a great guy who have very good knowledge of philately. I will show you how. We talk about 1919 or 1920. So these figures and these names and the dates are critical for our next part of the postal history of Iraq, Ottoman Iraq. A very short history of the Ottoman Empire, postal services or the communication. In 1840, the Imperial Post Center or the Imperial Post started, Postane Amire, in Istanbul, and later on the Ottomans' first postage and revenue stamps starting 1863 was printed. I just put some examples from my collections. They are very well-known stamps. So the uppercase is the normal postage definite stamps, and the other two are the revenue stamps. I needed to put these because these stamps will be our case to work on. Okay, next is also another stamps, which is will be in our story today. In 1914, the January, end of January, the Ottoman state decided to ask Wilkinson Bradbury, it's a company from London, to print a new series of stamps, where it was the first time that Istanbul and the surrounding was demonstrated, depicted. Very interesting, very beautiful stamps. It's a series of 17 stamps with all different denominations. You can see the stamps. It's mainly about scenes or sceneries from Istanbul historical areas. Okay, so let's go back to the Mesopotamia expedition, to the worst part and the postal services. This is Basra, the first town of Iraq in 1914, occupied by the British. And what you see is a spoy, or the British Indian soldier. They used to call them spoy. And just behind the four people, you can see there is a small sign of the post and telegraph station or office in Basra, which was the first post office of the British in Iraq, British occupation army, let's say. And let's go back to how what the British have tried to do in favor of communication. So when they occupied Basra, they have already prepared a team from the Bombay people, or Bombay Circle, they call it, post center, and they have about 14 staff, main staff, with almost 29 workers. So they to establish the post offices, let's say, in Iraq, but they intended to use the India postage, British India postage, in these services with the overprint, as you can see, IEF. So we are back, first time we see the Indian Expeditionary Forces. This is the forces whom had started the occupation of Mesopotamia or Iraq. So these are the stamps which was first used in Basra, and then we can see as the British Army continued to the north, actually occupying Baghdad, we can see that they have already used them as well in Baghdad. So this is another story where when they in Basra they have occupied it, they used the consulate, British consulate, and the headquarters. So when we come to Baghdad, you see same thing, that the British Army or the British post in Baghdad used the same stamps, the Indian Expeditionary Forces stamp in Baghdad. So till here, everything seems very normal. I mean, there is an army, there's a war, an occupation, and the occupation of Baghdad is being done, completed, and the army would like or need to use stamps for the normal public, for its staff. Of course, there are about 200,000 soldiers who need to communicate with their homes, so they need to use these stamps. What happened, this was very interesting later on. We go to Percy Cox, this famous guy. So next, Percy Cox decided that instead of IEF stamps, they have already captured about 14,000 Ottoman stamps in Baghdad and surrounding, and where they had some found in some merchant as well. So they decided to use this kind of overprint. Well, this is very interesting. which they have already tried it or experienced in Bushehr in Iran or Persia, with one differences that we see. It is written Baghdad in British occupation. But here, because these stamps were different types, we will see, and they had no machines to do this, so they had to use handmade stamps to overprint this stamps, postage stamps, the Ottoman postage stamps, to be used by the British Army in the postal services. Well, it's it's not hidden that this had been done because of the defeat of Kut al-Imara, because the British were very much angry on the Ottomans in Kut al-Imara. They never forget this. So they want to take the revenge from the Ottomans by using their stamps and indicating that they have already occupied Baghdad. So this is very interesting scenery to see. But we have more stories about this. Here we can see Percy Cox have already written to London about this, where he writes that maybe you can see this written. I have made it a bit bigger. So here what he wrote, he said, he made a list of what they have captured. This is of the Turkish stamps and how they have overprinted it. There was a list, and on 1st of September, they started using this Ottoman stamps with overprint made by handmade stamps, actually. So here we can see, this is from his memories, from his notes taken in Mesopotamia. This is very interesting archive. I found it in Qatar, actually, Qatar. So I used it. Actually, this exact number is available. It's 14,580 such stamps with different 20 types stamps were used in the early days of this application. As you can see, with Baghdad as a bit bigger, and then in British occupation. Of course, what they have to use as a denomination was Ana instead of pound or cent or others. Ana is the Indian currency, because it was the British India Army, and the Indians were actually in Iraq. So they used this Ana instead of Iraq. There was no Iraqi money. Of course, they cannot use the Ottoman money. So you can see here 2 Ana, which is it's a part of ruble, rupiah of Indian. We continue and see what happens next. Is we can see the currency. I made for you a demonstration how they had changed this Ottoman stamps. This is one stamp. So first they used a stamp made from rubber to put the name Baghdad, and then another stamp with in British, and the other one occupation. This is 3 different handmade stamps, one by one, and then they put the denomination. Ana was used in Iraq, and even after it became a state until 1932, by the way. And this is the Ana. It is the British India money used in India, of course, with George V as the king. Just another philatelic details. You can see when the British occupied Bushehr in the early 1915, they said, with their overprint is Bushehr under British occupation, while in Baghdad, they decided to make this Baghdad in British occupation. What is this detail? We have to look. We have to look to the difference between under and the in, which is used in Bushehr and Baghdad. Actually, Baghdad in British occupation means that this is a temporary control of the city, and well, this is English version of it. When you say Baghdad under British occupation, which is not used, emphasize that will be under governance and control of the British. Since the British at that time, they did not decide to stay in Iraq at that time. They had used, instead of under, they have used in British occupation. And this shows from the stamps we can understand at Mesopotamia, they were permanent and they will go back until Basra. That's what we have understood from the stamps. So we can see a lot of history on stamps. Next, when the British still moved north to Mosul, there another things or another case had happened. This is British occupation Baghdad, a stamp, a cover, just a sample for you. We have to remember again the Sykes-Picot Agreement. You remember, friends, we talked about this 1916 agreement to partition the Ottoman area. And here is the A and B, the French and the British line. And this yellow line shows the area of Mosul, which was at that time, as decided, to be controlled by the French. But the British, when they continued to the north of Mesopotamia in the First World War, when they arrived to this area, they have to make a decision. Should they occupy the city Mosul, which was the second biggest city of Iraq at that time, and still, or they should wait for the French. But the French army was very much occupied or involved, had no time. They were in Syria or maybe nearby Lebanon at that time. So the British took the chance where the French is not available, and they have occupied the city Mosul, which is also very rich of petrol. This is the first petrol zone in Iraq where the first as well commercial petrol was found later on. So how was this reflected to stamps? Also another case. Let's see. This is an Ottoman tax stamp or revenue stamp. So when they occupied Mosul, they couldn't write, or they decided not to write Mosul in British occupation, because when they write this, they will be confronted with the French, because they have already agreed that Mosul area by this Sykes-Picot agreement should belong to the French. So instead of writing in British occupation Mosul, they have decided to use a very strange words, actually. They say postage, IEF, which is the Indian Expeditionary Force, with Team D. So this is small group D, which occupied the city. So, of course, keeping the currency, again, as Indian, 1.5, half an anna. So this is what they have done, not to annoy or not to make the French angry on them. This is, I found this in the archives. This is a postal notice by the British postal services in Baghdad. What is he wrote? Issue of postage stamps for use in Mosul, and instead, as I said, using the terminology Mosul in British occupation, they have decided to use just very few words, which doesn't mean too much, but it just indicates that the Indian Expeditionary Force was in the city, but still they wanted to use the Ottoman stamps because there was no other stamps to be used. They have used this tax stamps from the Ottoman. And this is very interesting. You can see the diplomacy and the war on the stamps. Okay, after the occupation of Iraq is completed now, and the war was ended, now was a new case for the British. Iraq as a country or as a state was not formed yet. There was no officially Iraq declared, but on 1918 there was part of Mesopotamia, almost all of it, occupied the British. So what to do? This is one couple of stamps which was used in Mosul, as I said, very strange stamps with overprint postage, IEFD, with different denominations. And this is the cover sent to London from Mosul. So after the establishment of Kingdom of Iraq, the British have to make a decision to have stamps for Iraq. So what they have done, again, now we go back again to Percy Cox. He have already found something from the philatelic catalog. He was looking at Stanley Gibbons' catalog, and he found something very interesting. I'll just show you. He have found that this is from his memories. I noted from catalog Stanley Gibbons that a very handsome set of Ottoman stamps issued in 1913, actually it was issued in 1914, and printed by the British, Bradbury Wilkinson in London. So what he have done, he have wrote to the Foreign Ministry of England or the Kingdom, asking them to ask the company to lay down or to give to the authorities the dies or the molds of these stamps to print a new series of complete new series of stamps to be used in Iraq. And this is what he have wrote already. So I made it for you just to read it better. So Iraq doesn't have their stamps. So what had happened? They used this, remember the stamps, the last stamps of the series from the Ottoman stamps. So this time they made the first Iraq stamps. So as they done before, they called this Iraq, British occupation, again with Indian denomination. So this is the first time Iraq as a name appears on a document, on stamps. And that's why we said we made the name of this seminar, Iraq Crafted on Stamps. This series is about, this series originally is 17 stamps, but the British used only 13 of them with different denominations. I have just put a couple of these, some of them, not all the 13. I just put some of them. So as you can see, a quarter of anna, half an anna, 1 anna, 3 anna, 5 rupees, 6 annas, and 8 annas, and others, of course. So this is the first, of course, overprinted Iraq stamps, and which is being used till 1923. And I just added a couple of examples or covers, one from Baghdad, one from Mosul, were sent, one of them sent to Germany, and the other one is sent again to British Guiana, South of America, from Mosul. Okay. Just to end, this is the book which have the whole story, full story of the postal history of Ottoman Iraq during the British occupation, which had also a lot of examples from my collection and from other books as well. You can find all the details in the book, and as well we had in the magazine we have also published on the journal an article about this case, a bit shorter, of course. So this is the end, and I would like to thank you all for listening to me and be patient with all these historical philatelic events. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Oral. It's the second time that I follow this presentation, and like it was in Bucharest, it's very fascinating to me, your presentation, because it's perfect in line with the editorial style of post-Horn. That means to make an article or a speech or a book that tell about an history in which the stamps and the cover represent the witness of the history. This is exactly the philosophy that I think is much more interesting rather than just like to present a list of stamps, but knowing the history, especially in this case, as you can see, the stamp are really are the witness of the history of the Iraq, but I'm sure that it can be the same in other countries. So thank you very much for this very fascinating presentation. Now I ask somebody if you want to ask a question to you. Perhaps, Agnello, you should open the microphone of the people that are interested to make.
Mia, yes, of course. There are some questions.
Yes, sir. I'm listening.
There is no Bruno Crevato, so I don't know if the Bruno Crevato Selvaggi is on the line. Normally he's starting to broken the ice, but I can do in his behalf. You mentioned the printing of 14,580 stamp with the 25 different types that was overprinted in ANA.
Yes.
How much are rare these stamps?
Yeah, this is interesting. A good question, a very good question. You see, we talk about here the list. I just want to find the list for you. Where's the list? I just need to find the list.
Okay, the 14,580 it was before.
Here's the list which is made by Percy Cox. You see, they found 25 different types. Some of the stamps were only 77. Some of them were, you can see the list to the middle, number of each variety. So there is 59. So there is 59 of one type, which is really, really very rare. There is a couple of them with 1,000.
Okay.
So
but,
there is up, yeah.
These 59 are mostly rare in stamp or used?
Well, we don't know. They are stamps.
Okay.
They are just, we know from the list there is such stamps, but used, I don't know if how many of them we just found in our time. I don't know, but this is the list. There is some of them. I have 7 types of them, not the rarest, but I have some rare, but I have 7 such stamps, different types.
And from the commercial standpoint, this 15A or 70, how much is the value in euro or in dollar, the current value?
About the rarest one is about 3,000 euro and more, and the cheapest is about 400 euro, 350 to 400 euro.
So it's not a huge money.
No.
It's still a collection that can be done.
Yes. But I don't think we can find any more of them, especially this 98 and 70, 65 and some 70 and 75, something like this.
Okay.
This is the list we have from Percy Cox, who had made it actually in Baghdad. Yeah. He had the one who had made it in Iraq. So this is real numbers.
Okay. there is somebody that wanted to ask a question. He can tell, potete anche fare la domanda in italiano e faccio io poi la traduzione se siete interessati.
Posso intervenire? Se mi sentite?
Yes, please, Sergio.
First of all, I'm very agree with Ernesto because everybody must do postal history with also historical and political things of that period, and so I'm very glad to see your conference. Because we can say, I just want to say a consideration. We can say that without this figure of Percy Cox, maybe all the rest will not happen. Because of Percy Cox was a philatelist, and so
yes.
Because he was, I think, a sort of postmaster of that places. No, he just decided everything and then inform the central government. So it was without Percy Cox, maybe the story would be different.
Yes, because we can see from his report talking about a catalog in 1918. He knows about the catalogs for the philately. So as a soldier, as a general fighting in Iraq, or he's coming from India actually. So he was in India, then in Persia. So if he is not interested directly in the philately, I'm sure he will not know about this. So as you said, it's not only, by the way, Percy Cox who is the philatelist. The King of England was also a very important collector. So there is also communications where the king is asking for his part of this collection. So there is a communication between Iraq or the commissioner and the foreign office. They're asking that the king is asking for this part of the collection. So he is also a very important philatelist as well, the king himself. So we can see the British involved in this case. They knew what they are doing, of course.
I see on the line Flavio Riccitelli. There is no aerophilately if somebody don't start to make, let me say, cover on the first flight. Also in Italy, we have some overprinting that was made across the Second War finishing that was made because philatelic interest by somebody.
Yeah, okay. Well, when we talk about airmail, of course, the collection I have of modern or the Iraq after 1918, there is very important collection for Baghdad or Cairo-Baghdad airmail, which was invented by the British to communicate from Baghdad to Cairo by military airplanes, and from Cairo to England or to the kingdom by regular ships, steamers. So this collections, which started in 1922, I think, is also very important, but using Ottoman overprinted Iraq stamps, not Baghdad and Mosul. There is a very important collection about this as well.
Okay.
Claudio,
sì,
scusami.
Please, go ahead.
Dico in italiano perché l'inglese
sì.
mi diventa difficile poi tradurre. Io ho fatto alcuna domanda perché ho visto che l'argomento non toccava un periodo legato alla posta aerea, per cui era pura curiosità la mia quella di ascoltare. Comunque Baghdad era uno scalo importante nella linea dell'Imperial Airways della valigia delle Indie Aeree.
Okay, stop for a second. Flavio Riccitelli is Italian expert, is the best expert in aerodefilately, and he
Best
said,
is your.
no, you are now the most important, really. And he said that Iraq, Baghdad was a very important hub
Yes,
for the let me say the air mail for the India pathway from
yes,
Europe to the Indian.
yes, yes, yes.
Be
This is what
very
I this is
interesting.
what I was this was what I explained. This was started in 1921 when the British have decided to have an air flight connection from Cairo to Baghdad each week, once a week, repeatedly. So each 2 weeks, actually, 1 week from Baghdad, 1 week from Cairo. So that was the first start, actually, which then expanded, moved to British India, and even I know in 1932, 33, it's even expanded to Australia. So this is first started in Cairo to Baghdad, 1921, for I think for 9 years or 8 years, correct. And Baghdad was the hub. Baghdad was the hub, yes. Collecting all the letters from all around, even from Persia, Iran, used to come to Baghdad to be in quick connections to Cairo, and from Cairo to Europe, actually. So Baghdad was a hub for this aeronautical mail, actually. Yes, correct.
Yeah. Flavio, ti è chiaro cosa ha
Sì,
detto?
ho capito, grazie.
Ok, now if you need, se ora hai bisogno di qualche aiuto per qualche volo, sai a chi rivolgerti. I
Va
said
bene.
oral that
Teniamo
Flavio...
conto che nel 1939 la Littoria creò una linea aerea che andava direttamente a Baghdad e a Bassora.
Oral, Flavio said that in 1941 Ala Littoria, that was the Italian...
39,
1939, make a flight and directly to Baghdad, and from Italy, I don't know if Rome or Milan, and Bassora directly.
Okay, I have explained also this Cairo-Baghdad connection. I have a couple of covers. In my book, it is also written, there's about 10 pages about this case. It was an interesting case, actually. It's not my main collection, but I have parts of this in my book. Yeah.
Oral, I said to the Italian collector that is on the line, now in case you have some cover that is shipped in Iraq, they knows now who is the expert, just to getting information, just in case.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Again, thank you very much for this conversation and conference. Just to give you another idea, now I'm just finishing. Actually, it's finished. The digital print was out for last control. I'm writing another book, which took me 3.5 years. It is Ottoman Jerusalem postal history, and behind is a lot of diplomacy, politics, commercial, religion, everything. And Italian Post is very critical in Jerusalem from 1902, 08 until 1914. I'm writing also about the Italian Post, the French, the Russian, the Austrian, and the German. It is a very, very, very interesting book. It's about 400 pages. 380 pictures and photos. I think it is going to be the first one, I hope, in Turkey about this. It's a collection of the whole foreign postal services in Jerusalem as a case study of this interesting postal history or postal war between states at that time, again, before the World War I, actually. So I hope when we finish the book, I can present it to your colleagues. Colleagues, it's going to be a very interesting book. It's going to be a very interesting book.
So this means that you will prepare another interesting article for Postorn, and also I can
I hope.
display your book review on the magazine. So, if there is no any other, se non c'è nessun'altra domanda, io chiuderei qui perché sono le 22:14, è passata quasi un'ora come al solito, e quindi le chiuderei a meno che non ci sia qualche altra domanda. Perfetto.
Grazie Claudio, grazie Ora, thanks Ora for all.